With global outrage swirling about the shooting of Palestinian civilians at aid centers, a new bombshell statement from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is shedding new light on the situation, saying 12 aid workers were murdered by Hamas while others were tortured. Well, Shimon Myers, CEO of Arise, is back to unpack this news. So, Shimon, what do you think about what GHF revealed?
Well, it should be something that garners global outrage. Why are we hearing nothing about this? And I think that's the question we should be asking. We don't even know the names. This actually has been out for, I think, over a week now, for several days. It's just circulating around now. And not only were they murdered, some of them were actually tortured by Hamas. Now, they have not yet released the names. There are some reports that say they're Americans. There are some reports that say that they're locals, which would mean that they're Gazans. And it would be my guess that they're Gazans, because if they were Americans, we probably would have heard about it already. But nobody seems to really care if Gazans are killed by Hamas, which is a regular occurrence in Gaza. And for those of you that are genuinely concerned with the humanitarian crisis that is most definitely taking place in Gaza right now, you might want to ask, why is Hamas standing in the way of its own citizens receiving humanitarian aid?
So let me read you a couple statements from the GHF because it's startling. Talking about Hamas, quote, pre-positioned armed operatives near humanitarian zones in an effort to disrupt the only functioning aid delivery system in Gaza. I mean, these statements are incredible. Quote, the targets of Hamas's brutality are heroes who are simply trying to feed the people of Gaza in the middle of a war. One more, because this is just, wow. Hamas has placed bounties on both our American security personnel and Palestinian aid workers, offering cash rewards to anyone who injures or kills them. That is an enormous statement, and no one cares. What do you think this says about the video we did yesterday about Palestinians being killed at aid centers?
First of all, it's unthinkable. What an unthinkable situation. And again, for those of you like yourself, Raj, and me, who really care about human life and human dignity and the lives of civilians in Gaza, you should be absolutely livid about this. Hamas is the government of Gaza right now. And I want you to think about it. I want you to put that in the context of your own country, wherever you live, and think about if there's a humanitarian crisis where people need food, need medical care, et cetera, and your own government is standing in the way of you receiving that care. And not only are they standing in the way of it, they're killing the people that are trying to bring you that aid. They put a bounty on their head. And it's just another demonstration, Raj, of what we talked about yesterday, how Hamas is in no way concerned with the well-being of the citizens of Gaza.
So here's the question, though. I think for a lot of folks, and you just said it perfectly, our heart breaks for what's happening to the Palestinian civilians inside Gaza. You see the clips on X, on Instagram, and it is atrocious. But how should we view this when it's like, wait a second, hold on, time out. Maybe we're being deceived. Maybe we're not seeing the whole side of the story. What interest does Hamas have in doing this? Why would they literally be killing, torturing, and putting bounties on the heads of the people who are trying to give aid? What would the reason being behind that?
That is a great question. And it all comes down to control. Hamas has controlled Gaza since 2006. And the way they came to power was questionable. We won't get into all that right now. But they exercise control with the use of force and violence. You're not allowed to criticize. You have to comply with Hamas. And as long as they control the supply chain, of food and resources and medicine and so on and so forth, they can control the population. As long as they can control those basic needs of the civilians of Gaza, they maintain their control over the population. Once an outside source comes in and begins to give the aid directly to the citizens of Gaza, there's no longer a need for Hamas. And Hamas, by the way, takes this humanitarian aid, which is so generously donated by the global community and then generously delivered by the state of Israel, which is at war with Hamas. They take that aid, they steal it, and then they regulate it, they control the distribution of it, and they even sell it back to the civilian population of Gaza. So they are monetizing the humanitarian aid that's being generously donated and that Israel is actually giving the lives of its soldiers to deliver. It's an unthinkable situation. It's the heart of evil.
Here's the question, though. How is everyone deceived, from Al Jazeera to the BBC to the United Nations? If you look at basically anything, mainstream global philanthropy, when it comes to the United Nations, when it comes to, again, AJ Plus, everyone is piling on that Israel is intentionally starving people. They're intentionally killing babies. They're intentionally shooting civilians at aid distribution centers. They're intentionally starving the people. I mean, everyone that has a microphone seems like is saying the exact opposite of this. So what's going on?
Well, it leads to a question. Should we be trusting linear mainstream media? Has linear mainstream media been bought and paid for and now is just an outlet of propaganda, especially these extreme versions of it? Al Jazeera is unquestionably is concerned with one issue and one issue only, although, every now and again they may report on something else. But they clearly are an organization. First of all, they're owned by Qatar. And secondly, they're an organization that is committed to, framing Israel in the poorest light that they possibly can, and has been for many, many years now. And so, how can you be a news agency that's just supposed to be delivering news when you have an agenda? When you look at bodies like the UN, again, you'd have to jump into the weeds, and it's only a couple layers of research to understand the major voting blocks that are in the UN. Again, it's the OIC. Look it up. The OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the NAM, the Non-Aligned Movement, which started during the Cold War, really trying to mediate between the Soviet Union and the United States. But eventually they ended up moving in this very socialist direction, and they represent a majority in the UN. So they have over 120 countries that they represent, about 62% of the UN, and therefore they have a perpetual and indefinite majority. So, and they have an agenda. That's what you have to understand. These are not neutral governing bodies anymore. They're taking their power and they're using it towards an end, which is to discredit, delegitimize, undermine Israel. But really the reason for that, I'm so sorry to monologue here, there's a greater story that's unfolding, which is Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy against those that seek to destroy it and undermine it.
Well, it usually seems to me like everything that they're accusing, defenders of Israel doing, they themselves are the ones actually doing it. I see a lot of comments, how much did they get paid to say this? How much is the Zionist entity paying you? How much is AIPAC paying you? Let me just state off right at the bat. Shimon is on here right now for free. We've never paid him ever. I've never received a dime from the state of Israel, from AIPAC. I've never even been to an AIPAC conference. So all of these statements, and we've had people that have left Islam to find Christianity. They go, how much did the Zionist entity pay them? Let me state this unequivocally. We have never paid a dime to any guest that at least I've ever had on here. So it's just like, that's not true at all. But you, who gets funded by Qatar, are the ones making this accusation. So it's like they're accusing people that have a heart for Israel. Doesn't mean everything that Israel does is good. Doesn't mean we can't criticize Israel. Doesn't mean there aren't plenty of videos to go around that's like, that was wrong, that was wrong. Of course. You want to find people criticizing Israel? Talk to Israelis. But this whole idea that it's like bought and paid for, I would love to see that money. I live in California. I got a mortgage to pay. I've never received a dime from the state of Israel. But it is interesting that the things that they accuse people that at least give Israel a fair shot of doing, they themselves are doing that. So Shimon, we could
Raj,
talk about this for a long time.
That's a great point. As we're winding down, I would encourage you and your listeners, if you have not understood this, or if you have that same question, do yourself a favor, just get out your phone and Google accusation in a mirror. Accusation in a mirror. And it may give you some enlightenment into exactly that paradigm that you're describing right now, which is accusing somebody of exactly what you are doing or intend to do. It's the ultimate form of gaslighting, and it is not something that's new. It's extremely intentional, and we should be aware of it. Look at its origins. I'll name a name, Goebbels. Take a look at it, though. It's called Accusation in a Mirror, and it'll shed some light on exactly what you're talking about.
Shimon Myers, thank you for your time, my friend.